Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet the Alpine crochet pocket scarf, which is a free pattern that I designed for Yarnspirations. To make this pattern, you'll need 5 total balls of Red Heart Heatwave, 4 in your main color. For this one, obviously, it was the gray or passport, and 1 ball of your contrast color. For this one, I used Sandy Shores, which is this off-white. You'll also need a USK 6.5 millimeter crochet hook, or whatever size gets you gauge. The finished pattern is approximately 10 inches wide by 74 inches long, excluding the fringe, which is of course optional. Now, as you can see, this is a highly textured stitch pattern, and I've used that same stitch pattern for the main scarf and the pockets. The only difference is we change colors for the pockets to add these great stripes. Then we simply sew them on when the scarf and the pockets are all finished. Then we add the fringe. Now I wanted to show you, since this is a textured pattern what the backside looks like on this scarf. You can see it is a little different. It's actually quite smooth, but it's also quite attractive. So while this scarf isn't officially reversible, both sides of it do look really nice, which is always great when you're wearing something like this. And one thing I do want to point out is that you should adjust the height or position of the pockets for the wearer. Some people are shorter, some people are taller, which means their arms are different lengths. So you'll want to adjust these pockets a little bit depending on how tall the wearer is. The shorter they are, the further up the scarf you'll want to go. And of course, the taller they are, the further and closer down to the ends. Okay, so I already have the slip knot on my hook, and following the instructions, it says with the main color, which for me was the gray, foundation double crochet 27. Now, this stitch pattern actually works with any number of odd stitches, so if you wanted to make a narrower scarf or a wider scarf, you absolutely could do that. Now, the other thing I want to point out is that everybody makes their foundation double crochets a little differently. So if you have a different method of making foundation double crochets, that's totally fine. And if you'd prefer to avoid that stitch altogether, you can simply chain and then work 27 double crochets into that chain. As long as you've got 27 double crochets at the end of the first row, you're all set. So to start my foundation double crochet, I'm going to start with a chain of 2, and then I yarn over and I go under that underneath loop, or the back hump, if you will, of the chain that I made first, so the one furthest from the hook, and I yarn over and pull up a loop there. Then I yarn over and pull through just that first chain, and that right there is now going to count as the chain at the bottom of my first stitch. Then I yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2, just like a standard double crochet. So now we've made our first front post double crochet, and whenever I work a row like this, I like to put a stitch marker in my first and last stitch. It just helps me keep track and not get confused as I come back about exactly where that last stitch is. So to continue on with our row, we yarn over and go under those 2 loops at the bottom, the ones I pointed out that now are now the chain at the bottom of our first stitch. So we put our hook right under there, almost as if it was the top of another stitch. Then we yarn over and pull a loop through, and go ahead and give an extra little tug on that loop you've just pulled through for that chain. One of the things that happens with foundation double crochet is that sometimes that loop tends to be a little tight, and then you get a curve. If it's a gentle curve, don't worry about it, because your other stitches will pull it out straight. But if it is a severe curve, just pay more attention to pulling up that first loop. So then, to finish off our stitch, or rather continue it, we yarn over and pull through that loop, which now becomes the chain at the bottom of our second stitch. Then we finish off our double crochet, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So the rest of them are just like that last one we made. We yarn over, go under the 2 loops at the bottom of the previous stitch, yarn over again, pull up a loop, that will be our chain, yarn over again and just pull a loop up through our chain there, and then we can make our double crochet. Yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. So continue making foundation double crochets or chain and double crochet until you have a total of 27 stitches for your row 1. Okay, so as I said, at the end of your first row, you should have a total of 27 stitches. I'm just making a small swatch here today for demonstration purposes. To begin our second row, we chain 1, then of course turn to work back in the other direction, and we simply single crochet in each stitch of the row. So just standard single crochets, 1 in each stitch, all the way across. So again, you should have 27 stitches at the end of row 2. Now the third row begins with a chain 3, and every row like this is where we start with a chain 3. That chain 3 is going to count as our first double crochet for the row. So again, what I like to do here is, this time I've moved up that stitch marker, and now I will put it in the top of that chain 3. That just helps me find that when I come back again for that next row, and it's a little easier sometimes to get the hook in there if you've sort of used your stitch marker to help open up that chain a little bit. So now we can turn to work back the other direction, and since that chain 3 counts as our first stitch, we're not going to work into that first stitch. We'll move on to the next one. So the next thing we do to start our repeat with our asterisk is we work 1 treble crochet front post around the double crochet below the next single crochet. It sounds like a mouthful, but it's not that difficult. We're going to start by making a treble crochet here, so we yarn over twice. Then we're going to work it as a front post stitch around the double crochet underneath the next single crochet. So this is our next stitch right here. Let me move that curve out of the way here. So this is our second stitch. This is the next stitch. If we look right at the base of that stitch, we can see it's worked into this double crochet down here. And we can even count across. We can count our posts and say that's the first stitch and that's the second stitch. So that's where we want to work this stitch. We're going to go around the post from the front, around the back, and pop up on the other side. Then yarn over and pull up a loop from behind that post. Give it a little wiggle if you need to, so you can get some room to move your hook around in there. Then yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, yarn over again, pull through the next 2 loops, and yarn over again and pull through the last 2 loops. And that's all there is to the front post treble crochet around that next stitch below the next stitch. Then we simply double crochet in the next single crochet. Now, because we worked around this post beneath the next single crochet here, that one we don't work into. That stitch is kind of already considered worked, basically. We want to maintain our 27 stitches across. We don't want to add any stitches. So we need to make sure to skip that single crochet behind our post stitches. So we come to the next one and put a double crochet right in there. There we go. And that's it. That's our 2-stitch repeat. Yarn over twice, find the double crochet beneath the next single crochet, go around that post from front to back, pull up your loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, and pull through 2. Then double crochet in the next single crochet. And if you're worried that you're putting those in the wrong spot, you can always flip your work over here a little bit and look at the top of that next row and just make sure you've got a stitch skipped in between those stitches that you've worked into. So that is basically our 2-stitch repeat that will carry us on across. Front post treble crochet in the next stitch, double crochet in the next stitch. So then at the end, you should end with a double crochet in the very last stitch. Okay, so this is what the texture should look like after you've finished your 3rd row. And on the back, as you can see, it's a lot smoother. So now we're ready for row 4, which is exactly the same as row 2. We chain 1 and turn and just single crochet in each stitch across. Now, because we skipped those ones down here, don't get confused. We're just working into the top of each of those stitches of the previous round, straight across. So whether it's a double crochet or one of those post stitches, we just work a single crochet right in the top. So again, we should have a total of 27 stitches at the end of row 4. Now the 4th row, of course, was made from the back, so it's smoothish on this side, and we've got our texture on this side, and now we're ready for row 5, which is going to be another one of those texture rows. So we're going to start again with our chain 3 that will count as our first double crochet. So I want to make sure and get my stitch marker under those top 2 loops. And again, especially if you're a beginner crocheter, this can really help you find where to put your hook when you come back for that next row and separate which of those are the top 2 loops from that bottom underneath loop. So I'll get my hook right back in there and turn my work, and then we can continue with row 5. Now, row 5 is going to be a lot like row 3 where we're creating these post stitches, but we need to work in between the previous ones to get that overlapping look. So we're going to double crochet in the 2nd stitch. So that's the one right above the previous post stitch. The single crochet is worked in that post stitch there. So we put a double crochet right there. So we can get ourselves into the fabric a little bit before we start on that stitch pattern. So then we can begin our 2-stitch repeat. We do a treble crochet front post around the next double crochet beneath the next single crochet. So it's a lot easier now. You can see the texture. You can see here are our 2 post stitches. We want to go around the stitch in between them. So we go right around that double crochet just as we were doing before and work off our treble crochet here. There we are. Always take your time working off those pairs of loops. And you'll see too, as I make those stitches and pull up through those loops, I always call it choking up. It makes me think of baseball. You kind of choke up on that stitch a little bit as you go, and that helps maintain the consistency of the tension throughout that stitch. So if you find your treble crochets are getting a little leggy or weird, you can definitely try just securing that stitch as you make it with your other hand. Then of course, we move on with our stitch pattern. So we double crochet in the next stitch. And again, you can always flip it over and check and make sure that you've skipped that stitch in between. And then, of course, we have another treble crochet around the next one. So we just continue that on across. But because we've offset that pattern just a little bit, that means this row will end with double crochets in the last 2 stitches, just like it began with double crochets, if you include that chain 3, in the first 2 stitches. So just continue making those stitches on across, and that's all there is for row 5. Now rows 2 through 5 are our pattern. That's our stitch repeat. A single crochet row followed by one of these textured rows, another single crochet row followed by another textured row, just that little bit offset. So you just keep repeating those on all the way through till you make the scarf. Then when it's time to make the pockets, we simply change colors every 2 rows, but you actually start doing it after the first row. So to make the pockets, you would you would not be starting as many. You would want to start with only a foundation double crochet row of 23, simply because we want those pockets to be a little bit narrower than our scarf. But like I say, you'll make that first row in your main color, and then when you come to the single crochet row, you'll switch to your contrast color or color A. So to do that, we're going to pretend that I'm making a pocket here and we've just made our first row of double crochets, okay? Or maybe we're into our pocket a little bit and it's time to change colors. When it's time to change colors, when you get to the end of the previous row and we're on that last stitch, you want to stop with 2 loops left on the hook. Let me pull up some more of this yarn here and find the end. There we are. So to change colors, we're simply going to yarn over with our new color and pull that loop through those last 2 loops, like so. You can give a little tug on that end of the yarn to help secure it a little bit and pull that loop down to size if it got stretched out. Then we're just going to let those loops hang there for now, and we're going to continue on to make our first row here with our contrast color. Now this is again just a single crochet row. The stitch pattern doesn't change at all. It's just a matter of changing colors every 2 rows. So I would go ahead and switch here to this color for the single crochet row, and then I would come back for the next, whatever the next texture row would be, wherever I'm at in the pattern. Of course, if we're starting the pocket row, it would be just like row 3. And then when we get to the end of that row, we would change colors again so that we can carry our colors up the side of our pocket and not have to cut the yarn every time we switch colors. So I'm going to work across a couple rows here again, just in the same stitch pattern with our new color, so I can show you how to pull that color up along the edge. Now, as you can see, I've made 2 rows in my contrast color, so for my pocket, it would be time to change back to the main color. So I've stopped with 2 loops on my hook, just like I did before when I switched, and now I'm going to drop that and let it sit there and pull up the other color. So as I pull that up, I'm going to yarn over and finish that stitch with it. And you can see here, I'm just being really gentle. I'm not keeping a really tight tension, because if I pull really tightly, you see how that squishes down that previous row? I also don't want to make it super loose. If I do that, then as I make those stitches, this string here along the side will become loose and floppy and a problem. So really what you need to do is kind of just wiggle your hook and your fingers back and forth until you can feel that it's nice and secure. It's up against there, but there's not tension there. There's not looseness or tension. Like I say, just pulling back and forth a little bit till it looks about right is what I do before I proceed with the pattern. So of course, next we would have our single crochet row and then another textured row on through the pattern we've already done until you've made your finished scarf or pocket. Now, when you finish your scarf, you'll make the scarf before you make the pockets. We need to work an edging all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off this other color here so I can demonstrate how to do the edging for a bit. Okay, so to make the edging, what we're going to do is we're going to be working from the right side. We want to make sure to make our edging from the right side of the scarf. So that means from the textured side. So when you finish your scarf or your pocket, you'll end on one of these textured rows. Then what you're going to do is go ahead and turn to work along the side of the previous rows. So this is a little wonky here because this is just right where we changed colors, but if we're careful here, we should be able to work right over any of those floats, is what I call those little bits of the yarn along the side, as we make these single crochets so that it's hidden inside the stitches. So I'm going to start with a chain 1 because we're going to be making single crochets. And then I am going to work a single crochet right in the side of that stitch. And I don't want to put it in the side of the chain I just made. I want to go ahead and put it in the side of this stitch right here. So we can go ahead and just find a couple loops that it looks good to work under. Working into the edge isn't so much a science. I always say it's an art. It's kind of a matter of feeling with your hook where it wants to work into those sides of those stitches. And as long as you're consistent and you like the way it looks, then you're doing just fine. So I've made one single crochet right there in the side, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to go ahead and mark that first stitch as well so that you know when you've gone all the way around and you're ready to join and you don't mix it up with any of your other stitches here. So then what we're going to do, and this is a little different, to make this edging, we're going to chain 1 and skip where we would normally put that next edging stitch, which would be right about there, and come on down to the side of this single crochet. Normally, I would work 2 single crochets in the side of a double crochet and 1 single crochet in the side of a single crochet. But with this stitch pattern, I found that that created a bit too much border and it caused it to ripple. So instead, we're going to, it says skip a stitch, but essentially skip where that stitch would be and come down here to where you'd put the next stitch. And go ahead and put your single crochet right in there. Then we chain 1 again, skip where we would normally put that next stitch, and come down to where you would normally put the stitch after that. So basically, it's chain 1, skip 1, single crochet in the next, worked right along the edge. So we would continue that all the way down the side or edge of our scarf and or pocket until we got down to this bottom edge where we chain 2, and then do the same thing right across here. Single crochet in the first one, chain 1, skip the next one, single crochet in the next one. A lot easier along that bottom edge because you're not actually working into the edge. You're working under those top 2 loops that were left behind from our front post our foundation double crochets. So then when you get to that next corner, you chain 2 again, and then just do the exact same thing right up the side. Just eyeball it, see exactly where you want to put those stitches, play with a little bit. Again, a great guideline is remember that normally you would have 2 single crochets inside of each double crochet and 1 in the side of each single crochet. So that will help you space out your stitches till you get back up to the top, chain 2 again, work the same thing right across that top edge right there, and then you can chain 2 and join to that first single crochet you made for a great even edging. So as I say, that's what you do to finish off the scarf, and then set that aside and then go ahead and make 2 of your pockets with the striping pattern. Now for the striping pattern, it's the exact same thing. You work, just as I said, all the way around for that edging. And then you're ready to assemble your scarf. Okay, so once you've got your pockets made and your scarf, then it's time to sew those pockets to the scarf. You can see here we made it just a little bit narrower because we started with 23 stitches instead of 27. And then it's just a matter of using some more of that gray yarn to sew it on with a yarn needle. Just make sure to remember that you leave that top edge open, otherwise it's just a pretty patch, not a pocket. Now for the spacing of these, as I said, it depends on the height of the wearer, essentially, how long their arms are. So I like to put mine up about 2 inches from that bottom edge. I'm about 5'7", 5'8". So just as a guide, that'll give you a little bit of a, so you can see exactly where you want to put that scarf. Ideally, if you have the person's height, you can make the whole scarf just a little bit longer than their height, and that helps you place those pockets as well. Keep in mind, someone's arm span is approximately the same as their height. So after all that, then it's time to add the fringe. So you can see I pulled off one of the little fringes right here. And again, the fringe is completely optional. You could totally make this scarf and leave the fringe off if you're not a fringe person. But if you do want to go ahead and make the fringe, you're going to want to cut about 90 pieces of the main color and 60 pieces of the contrast color. And then I like to mix them up a little bit. I take 3 strands of the main color and 2 strands of the contrast color, which you can see right here. And that's what I'll use for each one of these sets of fringe. Now you can make this fringe as long or as short as you like. Again, it's a great chance for you to customize your project. I recommend that when you start, you cut these about 12 inches long. This set's already been trimmed off, so they're a little bit shorter. But that gives you a little bit of a leeway so that when you do trim them, you can make them all a nice even length. So I'm going to match these ends up a little bit better since these have already been trimmed. And then once you've got your groupings of 5, it's time to go ahead and add them to the scarf. Now, this is where that edging we did is also going to come in really handy. Not only did it keep our sides from rippling, but it left us these great chain 1 spaces that are ready for our tassels or our fringe. So to add these, what we're going to do is essentially it's a lark's foot knot. So if you do a lot of macrame, you might be familiar with this one. But essentially what we want to do is go ahead and put our hook right in that chain 1 space. Then yarn over with the center of our fringe here. So again, since these are already trimmed off, I want to be a little extra careful. And then we can pull that whole group of yarns up through that chain 1 space, like so. And then I'm going to use my fingers. I'm going to actually pull the hook out here, but I want to put my finger in there to keep that hole open right there in that loop. And then I will just grab those ends and pull them right through. Give it a little tug here. Again, try and pull evenly on all those strands. And just give it a little pull down like that. And there we go. We've got the nice part of the front part of the loop, I guess you could say, showing at the front of our scarf. If we came from the other direction, you can see that's how that looks. So some people prefer that look. So if you want to do it from the front and get that look for your fringe, you absolutely could too. But I just happen to like the way it looks right there. So once you've applied all your fringe, again, if that's something you want to do, I recommend using a cutting mat and a rotary cutter and a strong, heavy metal ruler or perhaps a yardstick to help you get a great straight line as you cut off your fringe. Then you're all finished with your Alpine Crochet pocket scarf. So that's it for the Alpine Crochet pocket scarf. Again, this is made with Red Heart Heatwave, which is actually heat generating yarn, which will keep you even warmer and cozier. If you prefer to substitute the yarns, Red Heart with Love is a great choice. As you can see, this pattern has great big generous pockets, and I think it works just as well for men and women. So I hope you'll give it a try, and thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe.